समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Last week, new threats from the United States to cut the outsourcing of jobs to India, coming on the back of already crippling tariffs, have raised fears about the airless place the relationship has become trapped in. The United States and India, though, have known far worse. And in secret, spies from the two countries' intelligence agencies bypassed their own political leadership and played a critical role in helping their nations dig themselves out of the hole they'd got into. In this episode of Security Code, I'll be examining how those intelligence officers quietly helped open doors that seemed locked for good. Thank you for watching this episode of the Print Security Code. We know viewers and readers like you value the print for its high quality on-ground reportage and its depth of granular research. But producing journalism of this quality costs money, and that means we need support from readers and viewers like you. I urge you to consider taking a subscription to The Print. You'll find the links in the comments pane below. Edward Heath, Great Britain's Prime Minister, felt the words wash over him, hot like a dragon's breath. The United States had received nothing from India except a kick in the teeth in return for $750 million last year, President Richard Nixon raged. The Indians, Nixon went on, thought the white nations had no choice but to come in and bail India out. Alarmed a little by this anger, British Foreign Secretary Alec Douglas Holmes stepped in. The Indians were admittedly intolerably high-minded, he accepted. But there was an important common thread in preserving Indian independence from Soviet and Chinese domination. Nixon wasn't listening. The invective against Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and her nation, provoked by her refusal to back down on Bangladesh, continued in the privacy of Nixon's office. A slippery, treacherous people he called India. Even as the political leadership in both countries raged against each other though, the relationship between the Central Intelligence Agency and the Research and Analysis Wing remained robust. Historian Paul McGarr writes, in 1973, the head of the Prime Minister's Secretariat, Prithvinath Dhar, and the chief of RAW, Rameshwar Nath Kao, lobbied for CIA Chief William Colby to make a visit to India. Consider it. The leaders of both countries are abusing each other and the spies are asking for a quiet chat. As President Donald Trump appears to be leading the India-United States relationship into an abyss from which there's no return, adding restrictions to the outsourcing of jobs on the back of crippling tariffs, the period between 1971 and 1973 helps understand that the two countries have been locked in airless places before. The intelligence services of both countries, though, found ways to bypass the potholes and the cul-de-sacs, ensuring strategic conversation and exchanges continued. When better times came, those were to be valuable contacts. Little understood, India-US intelligence ties were forged right in the shadow of the Cold War, as New Delhi resolutely proclaimed its commitment to non-alignment. Late in the summer of 1949, India was struggling to contain its first post-independence insurgency, an uprising by communists in the Telangana region. The Indian army, which was sent to Hyderabad to battle the Nizam's armies, found itself at war instead with peasant insurgents in Telangana, flying the red flag. Thousands died in the brutal conflict. Nigel Kennedy and Sunil Purushothaman have recorded that as the army herded Adivasis into concentration camps, near starvation conditions prevailed. Less than 47 years old and with little experience of global politics or insurgencies, an unassuming police officer was tasked with helping India find the right tools to deal with this crisis. T.S. Sanjeevi, earlier a superintendent of police in Madras and now director of the Intelligence Bureau, was ordered to make a 3-week visit to Washington. For decades before independence, the Intelligence Bureau, the British Intelligence Bureau I should say, had been relentlessly focused on the threat of communism. Telangana was the first communist threat after independence. And for a while it looked like it would be India's first failure. To Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, it seemed that the threat was transnational and a danger to the survival of the Indian Republic itself. Remember, if Telangana succeeded, Bengal would go up in flames, and who knows what next. The colonial legacy meant India had a substantial relationship with the United Kingdom's intelligence services. The security services, popularly known as MI5, was one critical source of assistance in the first years after independence. But India became debilitatingly reliant on this relationship, the scholar Avinash Paliwal has recorded. This is satisfactory, an MI5 memo smugly noted about that relationship. But India was looking for partnerships, not junior partner relationship. George Kennan, then Director of Policy Planning at the State Department, agreed with Prime Minister Nehru's assessment. To address the challenge, Kennan recorded, Sanjeevi would have to, I quote, look beyond India's borders and seek to influence policy in regard to dangers from without. In other words, he'd have to be in a position to convince Nehru that despite socialism, he'd have to take some pragmatic steps. America would help him then push back against the global communist threat. The visit did not begin well though. Sanjeevi was affronted by the imperious behavior of the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover, and vowed never to allow contact between the Intelligence Bureau and the FBI. The damage was contained, however, during his subsequent meetings with officers of the Central Intelligence Agency. Sanjeevi came away with positive impressions of his meeting with Colonel Richard Stilwell, Kim Roosevelt, and the Director of Central Intelligence, Roscoe Hillenkoetter. Even though the two countries clashed over questions of ideology and global politics, the alignment of their interests wasn't particularly opaque. India's government provided, for example, arms and training to Tibet's ramshackle military after 1949, and even considered deploying troops in support of its independence. The problem was the Indian army just didn't have the resources. So in 1954, India formalized this reality, ceding many of its colonial era rights in Tibet, like stationing a notional number of troops in Lhasa, historian Karnakar Gupta has written. The Indian Intelligence Bureau, though, looked the other way as the CIA quietly supplied weapons and equipment to Khampa insurgents from 1958 on, historian Cloud RP has written. India also ignored CIA flights in support of Tibetan insurgents, which crossed over its territory en route from Dhaka in what was then East Pakistan. Langley supported the founding of the Special Frontier Force, intended to harry the PLA along the India-China line of actual control. And the CIA even saw the insertion of nuclear-powered surveillance equipment to gather intelligence on China's nuclear weapons program, which was taking place on Aksai Chin. Even as this intelligence cooperation continued, Prime Minister Nehru publicly kept complaining that the United States was interfering in Indian politics. I quote, buying up newspapers and spreading a network of publicity organizations. Later, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi assailed foreign powers for plotting, I quote, to run down India. CIA agents, American intelligence officer Russell Jack Smith later wrote sharply, were to be found, according to Madam Gandhi, beneath every charpai and behind every neem tree. Even as Prime Minister Indira frequently railed against CIA intervention to bring about regime change, and public outrage erupted when the journal Ramparts disclosed the CIA had been funding Indian anti-communist political parties in 1967, the relationship in the darkness carried on, as it were. As Sanjeevi told CIA interlocutors in 1950, I quote, he frequently had to take independent action without the knowledge of his government. The intelligence relationship survived even in the face of contradictory US objectives. For example, CIA personnel told India that they had detected signals traffic linking the jihadist warlord Sirajuddin Haqqani with the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate after the 2008 bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul, journalist Carlotta Gall has revealed. Although the FBI failed to pass on credible intelligence that Lashkar-e-Taiba operative David Headley was a terrorist, it also later helped the National Investigation Agency tie the 26/11 attack to Pakistan. It was complicated. Every country looked out for its interests and yet tried to find a little space to help new friends. Even though President Trump's administration has shown little interest in building a deeper counter-terrorism relationship, seeing jihadist violence as a secondary concern unless it directly threatens the United States, the ties built over decades between intelligence services are likely to prove durable. Will the intelligence relationship solve the broader crisis in India-US ties? Almost certainly not. But it does mean that there are strong pillars that will be holding up the relationship until a saner political leadership eventually takes charge. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to The Print. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.